Good evening and welcome to the Italian Impact Podcast. I am your host, Steve Stefano Mancini, and as always, I'd like to thank you, my listeners. I had a very interesting podcast last week, and sorry about the acoustics. It was long distance, but we had a very good conversation on citizenship. And I asked a very point-blank question to you, my listeners, especially those who are thinking about getting their Italian citizenship. Why do you want it? If the answer is because, you might want to think the thousands of dollars and the time you're going to expend to get that you might get your citizenship now with the change of the laws. Again, I have no secret knowledge, but my gut says the law will change. So, or at least some editing, some modification to it, something. But I will be shocked, and again, I don't have any secret knowledge, but I will be shocked if the law is not tweaked in some form. However, I did think it was interesting what my guest made the comment that inside of Italy, the idea that people, several generations removed overseas are gaining Italian citizenship is not something, the everyday Italian is even aware of, yet alone necessarily has a strong opinion. But again, like I said, having now been the honorary consulate, I see the pros and cons. I do see a lot of people getting their Italian citizenship that probably don't deserve it or shouldn't have it, but it's not my place to say that, but I say it as an observer. But I do see people who are sincere about it, want it for the right reasons, that now can't get it. So I'm very torn on the new law. It's how far back do you go before, you say, hey, maybe they're just really not that connected to Italy. I mean, do I go back to my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, who was a knight in in a medieval army out of Florence and say, well, he was Italian? Where does the line stop? Again, it's not my place to say, but having been sitting in a position where I'm seeing both sides of the argument firsthand, I do think changes were necessary, but I don't necessarily think the draconian measures that they took were the right approach either. At least they should have grandfathered it at a minimum. But I do like the idea of forcing people that want to be an Italian citizen. I do believe this. You should have to speak some Italian. You don't have to be super fluent because it's hard to be super fluent in another language when you're not living in that country. But I don't think it's unfair to speak some Italian. I can't. So many people come and get an Italian passport. They can't even say buongiorno. It's something to think about. I also want to thank all my listeners all over the world who keep finding me. God bless you. Keep doing it. I love it. I think it's so neat that right now there might be somebody sitting in China and Russia, and yep, I'm not kidding you, in Singapore and Brazil and the UK, Australia, Italy, obviously the US, Canada, and a lot of other countries that are actually tuning in. I think that is pretty awesome, and I think it's pretty wonderful that you're taking the time out of your schedule to listen to little old me. With that being said, I am back with another wonderful guest who I met sort of through, I guess, just through the, reach out and right. Just reached out. And again, so folks, if you don't think that I read your emails, think again, because I've had a few guests, the people I didn't know, that have just reached out to me and said, hey, you know what? I've been listening to your show, and have you ever thought of this? And the short answer is probably not. My brain just isn't that big. And so I rely on you, the listeners, to tell me what's a good guest and what's a good story. So I want to welcome today's guest, Glenn Beech. Glenn, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Steve.
And it turns out Glenn actually has an interesting story because you're a retired school teacher or professor.
Well, no, I was administrator at Penn State Greater Allegheny.
Okay.
Director of Student Affairs when I retired.
Did you never have to teach?
I did co-teach a couple courses, health education. Right. In fact, sometimes sat in for the Italian professor when she needed to go away.
Oh, nice. Was that because you speak Italian?
Sì.
Perfetto. Possiamo parlare solamente in italiano per questo. Anyways, I got carried away there. But Glenn, welcome to the show.
It's an honor.
I do thank you for reaching out to me because I did read the stories. One was just a really short story, I miei fiori. And then the other one was the wine.
The Last of the Wine?
Thank you. So real quick, though, Glenn, before we start going into the stories and the importance of them, let's talk a little bit about you, because obviously with a cognome, Beech, it's not exactly your typical Italian cognome. So Glenn, tell me a little bit about who you are and where you're from.
Non tutti le donne italiane sposano uomini italiani. And that's the case. My mother did not marry an Italian, nor did her two sisters.
Nobody's perfect, Glenn.
So, right. But
I had to go there.
It's my mother's maiden name is Mizuko, and she was born here. My grandfather, Giovanni Mazzucco, came from a small town in the Veneto, Pelos di Cadore in the provincia di Belluno.
Oh.
And he made at least 2 trips back and forth in the teens. Rumor has it that he didn't want to be in World War I, so he kind of came and immigrated stayed with his aunt out in Williamsburg, PA. But myself, I grew up in 2 blocks away from my grandparents' house, and it was almost on a daily basis that I was at their house and heard the Italian language every day and knew that I was in an immigrant family.
Now, let's kind of back up. Was that the original house he lived in since he came, like when he kind of got settled down and got married?
Well, no. He was married over in Italy.
So your grandparents, both of them immigrated
both of them
from.
were,
Okay.
Right. Nonna came over in about 1920 with my aunt Nenidis and Nene Eugenia, and they came over. Nonna was already here, and they moved to Library, Pennsylvania, where Nonna was a coal miner. And eventually they came to McKeesport, and he worked for one of the mills as a carpenter in McKeesport. And he built a house on 33rd Street. My aunt, Nenidis, she and her husband built a house on 32nd Street. And my mother and dad built a house on 31st Street. So it was a close-knit neighborhood.
Yeah, that used to be the norm. And a lot of that was simply out of necessity. You know, they weren't coming over here with a lot in their pockets.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, they're going to take a manual labor job and they're going to support and help each other out. I mean, that is a communal thing that, you know, and it's not limited to just Italians. I mean, the Polish did it, the Irish did it. Everybody does it when they immigrate here. They still do it to this day. You're more likely to stick with the folks you feel more comfortable with, because it's going to be easier to communicate. Language is everything. You kind of said it. They came over here. Did he speak any English when he first came over here?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Again, he stayed with family in Williamsburg, and then a number of the family went up to Niagara Falls, and he went to Niagara Falls. Apparently had a falling out with one of his cousins, and then for some reason he moved to Library. And there again, those are the pieces that I can put together from family history and ancestry. But you know, that's why I feel it's important for people to sit down with their ancestors and grandparents to get the full story of why, when, how, you know, did you get here? Because, like I said, I know that he made at least 2 trips. And Nonna, on the other hand, made 1 trip, and she always wanted to go back to Italy because she never liked the United States. You know, but when her daughters started getting married, then it didn't happen.
I want to just re-emphasize the point that you made without any prodding, by the way, to the listeners, but that has been my theme, that you have to talk to these people before they are gone. Yeah. I can't tell you how many questions and it's not so much, when you get older, you learn things. You also change as a person, and you ideally you become more introspective. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't become introspective. They just live in la 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 la, and they're oblivious to everything. And I sort of think those people miss life. I think they're just going through the motions, speeding around, you know, buying a bunch of junk they don't need, binge watching. Sorry, folks, I think that's a waste of life. Yeah. I think the true experience of life is that connection, not living in the past, but connecting to the past, because that's your roots.
Yes.
And then that drives your future. And I think later on in life, when you start to figure that out, sometimes it's too late.
Exactly.
And I feel like there's questions I'll never have answered because all the people that know the answers are gone.
Well, one of the things that, you know, pulled my interest, I go back to probably about the 4th grade, and you know, knowing that my grandparents came from Italy and that Christopher Colombo came from Italy and Genoa, you know, it was my dream always to go to Genoa, you know, even though it's far away from our village. But in 82, I had that opportunity with one of my travels to go to Genoa and kind of live out that dream. And you know, but that's when I got more interested in wanting to know, you know, more about my grandparents and, you know, why they came and, you know, what happened.
Now, let me ask you, you did know your grandparents, so you did talk with them.
Oh no, I grew up with them.
Right.
I grew up with them. I mean,
so you had some appreciation, some understanding of where they came from, at least.
oh yeah, because
there were no major gaps. That's what I'm going in your history.
Nonna, I mean, I can still remember, on at least a weekly basis, Nonna would be sitting at the kitchen table writing in Italy, and then as a kid, I couldn't wait for the letters to come from Italy, because what I did then was collected the stamps, because they were all so colorful and everything. So I mean, I had that, knowledge of wanting to know more and just that interest. And the funny thing is, you're talking about language. Now, Nonna eventually would speak English, but he wasn't the greatest. But Nonna, on the other hand, to the children and to her daughters, always spoke in our dialect, Ladin. And would speak so you thought she doesn't know English, but to her son-in-laws, who were non-Italians, she would speak English to them. But
Una lingua segreta. I don't want to teach these guys language.
Well, and that's the thing. If you wanted to know what the hell was going on in the family, you better tune your ears in to learn the language, because nobody was sitting down to teach you, but you better pick it up.
Now, you said dialect. Is that a common dialect in Italy, in that region still, or is it one of those kind of fading away?
Pretty much. No, it's, in fact, there's an organization that is keeping that particular language alive. And, even the times when I had gone over, they would say, do you want to speak in dialect, or do you want to speak in Italian? And I would always say, if you speak in dialect, I'll probably know it better, because that's what I grew up hearing, and it just would, I could hear my grandparents in that dialect.
Now, we're going to talk about what you're writing now, but I am curious. I want to back up on this dialect, because that's kind of a big deal to me too, because I think there are a lot of dialects. I mean, we know this. There are a lot of dialects. Some of them are gone. They've died out.
Right.
Some of them are dying out because the towns are so small. Young people, as soon as they get a little older, they're gone. And they're all raised, when they go to school now, no matter where you're at in Italy, it's Italian.
Proper Italian.
Right. So when they leave Italy, they're going to lose that. And eventually that's going to be gone. Do you ever feel the calling to say, you know what, I'd like to formally, I don't know, write a book, write a dictionary, do some kind of recordings, something?
Well, in fact, they do have a dictionary out online for this organization has put out, because they want to keep the Ladin language alive. It's pretty much centered up in the Dolomite Mountain, about 80 miles north of Venice.
Okay. You're way up there.
Yeah, I mean, at one time, I always kid, at one time we were probably Austrian, because the borders changed back and forth.
Right.
But we're about 24 miles away from Cortina, where the Olympics are going to be held again next year. Like I said, it kind of is in that area up there. And they also have said that it kind of has an offshoot from some of the Spanish language. So,
There's so much of I don't think people understand that over, hundreds, if not thousands of years, to your point, there's a migration. Some of it's voluntary, some of it's not voluntary. And when you have villages with a language and they move into the next village, something, either they're going to be assimilated and they're going to share culture and they're going to create something completely different. Maybe they're not. Maybe, like I said, maybe it's a some sort of combative reason to move, especially kind of in the area where you're talking.
Even in that area of Cadore, where my grandparents come from, there's a town called Santo Stefano, and it's kind of secluded in this mountain valley, and its origins come from Austrians who were trying to escape the Austrian Empire, and they settled in this valley. And when you go in, the architecture is more German than it is Italian, and they're speaking a dialect of German in addition to the Italian.
Interesting. But like I said, yours is very, very localized.
Right.
Okay. That's pretty neat. Because that's the one thing I got relatives now in Calabria that I've kind of been reintroduced over the last few years. Same thing. Went on a journey, found them. They too have a dialect. They'll speak Italian to me, but I do know that they'll say some things. Now, I do remember, because a lot of Calabrians came to Pittsburgh area. So some of those, let's say, I don't want to call it slang, but some of the common words you might say, like how are you kind of thing, stuff like that. Yeah. That's more of a slang Calabrian thing. So I'm kind of familiar with some of that, but when they go into full conversations, you're just
Lost.
It's gone. So they're kind enough to speak Italian to me, and I do appreciate that. Folks, I'm going to be right back after this break, but I want to start talking about the book and the writing. So
Okay.
we'll be right back.
Ciao, Chrissy. Your Italian got so much better. Brava.
Grazie. It's because I learned the best way possible.
How so?
Well, I learned that with apps, grammar books, and even YouTube videos, I could only get so far. I had to immerse myself. I noticed I did best when I was in Italy visiting family. That's where my level really soared.
And wow, did it work?
Thanks. I became much more confident, fast. That's why I created Footsteps Through Time. It's an Italian language experience. You don't just take Italian classes, you immerse yourself in a real Italian village. With lots of fun activities and excursions, it's life-changing.
I see. So, no more boring grammar, impersonal apps, just real conversations, real culture, and delicious food, of course.
Exactly. I'm so excited about this. Learn Italian by actually becoming part of the local community for a week and living it. So if you've been dreaming of Italy and the language, check out Footsteps Through Time in Italy.com. Book now and join the experience.
Andiamo!
Thanks to Greater Pittsburgh Travel. For any of your travel needs, let Tom and the team at Greater Pittsburgh Travel know, and they'll take care of you. For more information, call 412-331-2244 or visit their website at www.greaterpittsburghtravel.com. Did your parents or grandparents ever talk about the Vietnam War? The Hardest Year, a love story and letters during the Vietnam War, is an accurate portrayal of what life was like during the 1960s, a time of the draft, equal rights, and the anti-war movement. Follow newlyweds through their letters as they navigate 1 year of the war and ocean apart. The Hardest Year by Carol and William Wagner is available now wherever books are sold. And we want to thank the Calabria Club of Pittsburgh. If you're interested in learning more, you can find their contact information on Facebook at Calabria Club of Pittsburgh. Again, thanks Domenica and the team at the Calabria Club of Pittsburgh for your support. And we want to thank La Scuola d'Italia Galileo Galilei, the only nonprofit school in Pittsburgh endorsed by the Italian Consulate. If you're interested in learning Italian or have your children being immersed in the Italian culture and language, be sure to give them a call at 412-404-7070. And that's La Scuola d'Italia Galileo Galilei. We'd also like to thank Chris Gonzalez from the Knights of Columbus. If you have any questions about joining the Knights of Columbus, reach out to Chris Gonzalez at 412-605-9074. Hello, Bucko fans. This is Steve Stefano Mancini, international award-winning filmmaker and host of the award-winning Italian Impact podcast. Join us in celebrating the Italian community on August 23rd as the Pirates take on the Colorado Rockies. This special offer includes an exclusive Pirates co-branded Italian hat and loaded value, good to use on concessions and merchandise on the day of the game. Also, a portion of each ticket will be donated to a local Italian charity. So come experience a unique blend of sports, culture, and community during Italian Heritage Night at PNC Park. Grazie, ci vediamo. All right, welcome back. Again, I'm joined by Glenn Beech. Having a wonderful conversation, actually. It's kind of right up my alley. And again, I appreciate you reaching out because my whole, focal point has been don't forget history. Anybody can see, especially over the last few years, there has been, in my opinion, a concerted effort to tear down history. We don't like it. Let's get rid of it. Let's rewrite it. We want to make this country bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to take anything good out and we're going to highlight the bad stuff out of it and we're going to tell them how bad they are. And I see a lot of that. And I'll give you kind of one extreme example. Talk about the Germans. A weird example, but I'm going somewhere with this. The Germans in a lot of ways have never lived down World War II. They're not the only ones that have, bad on their bloods. Or blood on their hands. Oh, I really screwed that one. But they really, they're not the only country that has something dark, bad in there. But you could go to Cambodia with Pol Pot. You could go to what Stalin did to the Ukraine. You could go to Rwanda. So every country's got blood on their hands. Americans are no different. But where I'm going with this is there are certain cultures that are constantly under attack. And I still believe this. Italians are still under attack in this country. I'll give you two good examples. One, nobody really knows about one of the largest lynchings in American history that was actually Italians or Sicilians, who will debate whether they're Italian or not. And two, whether you like the guy or not, which is impossible because you didn't know him, whether you necessarily agree with everything that's been written about him, Christopher Columbus is a historical figure.
True.
He is an important historical figure. But yet there's this effort to tear those statues down and rename it somewhere else, as if he is responsible. He is personally responsible for every bad thing that ever happened. But you don't see that in a lot of other groups and cultures. So this is why I keep pushing the talk to your relatives, It's going to give you a better understanding of your roots. Now, nice transition into your book and what you're trying to do here. You're trying to capture that. To your point, your grandparents are gone. You can't ask them any questions. Right. But you did, seems like you've recorded a lot of stuff. When and why did you start trying to remember and record things?
Well, it's been going on for years, and I would just jot things down and just memories. And then I thought, my grandparents aren't around, but I can write things so my grandkids can have an idea of what I grew up with, in the kind of family I grew up in, what we did, different things. Like I said, it ranges everything from dandelions to making wine, to watching Nono make shoes, just going on walks with my grandfather and the things that he would say and do. And just, being in that neighborhood, because the neighborhood where I grew up, it was multicultural, mainly a lot of Italians, but there were Poles, there were Hungarians, there was a wonderful family, the Thomases, that were Welsh, that lived a couple doors down from my grandparents, and just hearing them talk was just, enlightening. But, I wanted to keep these things alive, for myself and also pass it down. That's why, I kind of gathered everything that I had written, and last Father's Day, I gave a copy to each of my children, say, these are stories. And I continue, something, just the other week, I was up in White Oak Park, and something came across that I was by myself, when usually I would take a grandchild or one of my children, up to the park and just reminiscing, and wrote something, a little story. And, again, just something sparks me.
I want to go to the dandelions, because a lot of people think we're crazy when we talk about this.
March.
Yeah, I didn't You can eat dandelions when they're fresh, when they first grow.
Yes.
And a lot of people in the old country do that. First time you saw that, did you think it was strange, or?
Oh no, we grew up, having dandelions with bacon vinegar, hot bacon vinegar dressing at my grandparents' house. And it was in early March. We would go out to Renzi Park in McKeesport, and we would pick the ones that they didn't. As long as there was no flower on them.
I think it was before they started sprouting, yeah.
And before the flowers would show in the top of the root, you'd get the real fresh ones. Come home, wash them, cut off the root. And just wonderful green salad. I
believe I've actually done that when I was, because I distinctly remember my grandmother telling me to go out, and we have some of them we grow in the grass. It's a weed, but at the same time, it's still a leaf that you can eat.
Oh yeah.
But I distinctly remember my grandmother telling me to go out and pick a couple of dandelions. Well, and I didn't think, at the time, I think I was so young, I was just like, la, 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 I didn't have a clue. But
what stirred that story was going to the grocery store one day and seeing in the produce section dandelions for like $3.98 a pound. And I'm thinking, my God.
Who's paying for it?
Yeah,
just go to your yard.
We would go out and, and pick them. I mean, it was something we did, from when I was a little kid. And in the story, it shows kind of like the embarrassment of, as you get older, of some of the things that your parents or grandparents did, and you're thinking, oh my God, I'm embarrassed by doing this now. But then now I'm looking at it and saying, that was just part of the culture that what we did.
And I'm now going to go look up. I'm curious what the health benefits are of dandelion leaves, and something tells me it's probably going to be really good for you. Because, again, I'm not an old fuddy-duddy, but there is something about the wisdom of previous generations that I think we've lost.
Oh, yeah.
We've exchanged it for comfort and convenience. And we wouldn't, how many people would even think, hey, go out and pick dandelion leaves before they.
Yeah, they'll pour Scott's Turf Builder on it.
Exactly. Well, I'm not going to lie. I just did that today, but not because of dandelions. I got a bunch of other crap growing out there, and I need to get rid of it. Of course, it's going to rain, so it won't matter. I'll get them fresh next year again.
Yeah.
They'll be right back. But let's talk about some of this story. So you're kind of just reflecting on life and thinking back, I will take it then that you were very close with your grandparents.
Oh yeah, like I said, growing up 2 blocks away from them, I was almost there almost every day. It was just a wonderful place to be. Nono would, be in the living room smoking his pipe, and you could see layers of smoke. I mean, from.
And he lived to be 90?
He was 86 when he passed.
So anybody, again, I haven't figured out who's smoking. Maybe it was something different about the tobacco back then. Because I had a lot of stories of a lot of people that smoked into their 80s.
It was Old Cuddy Pipe. That was the name of the tobacco that he would smoke. No.
I'm not encouraging people to go out and smoke
Right.
pipes now, by the way.
But, watching him, make a pair of shoes or repair a pair of shoes in his workshop, he would just, make different things. And then my grandmother, she was a good cook. We would make homemade ravioli, homemade gnocchi. There were times when they would order chickens from the local farmer, and Uncle Forrest would be in the shop chopping off the heads, and that night we're having a really fresh chicken dinner,
Well, this chicken's really good.
Yeah, but we'd have about a dozen chickens or so, and then everybody would go home with a couple to put in the freezer, so for future use.
Was there ever a point where you're like, I'm too old for this, or did you just never outgrow your grandparents?
Nono passed away when I was 18.
Okay.
And Nonna passed away probably about 10 years later.
All right.
So I was well into my 20s, and one of the things that always sticks with me is whenever I made a trip to Italy, I would come home, and the first person I would go to see would be her. And on 2 different trips, I would go and tell her, that I saw her sisters and or nieces, and relay messages, relay letters, and things like that.
I was going to ask you that. So you obviously still they still had relatives living there that were fairly close.
Yeah, I have cousins over there. We still keep in contact. All the Vecchini have passed, and those are the ones that I treasured meeting because, my Bubba Beppe, he was my Nono's youngest brother, looked exactly like him, and just when I would see him, it was just a rush of emotion.
How often do you go back?
Well, the last time I was there was 10 years ago. I took 2 of my children with me for their first trip abroad and to meet. And
What'd they think?
Well, my daughter Nina, she really tried to learn the language and try to express. I say that my son Christian, he was kind of like the ugly American.
Where's the McDonald's? This food is terrible.
I mean, he loved the food. He loved the food and the art, but he couldn't understand them, and he couldn't fight. He fought.
And that gets
himself.
frustrating. I understand. 'Cause you want to say something, and you're like, how do I? And then by the time you remember what you wanted to say,
with the younger generation of his age, because he was about 20 then, 21. The younger generation could speak English, but the older generation, no.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't there.
And depending where you're at, most of the people, I hate to say it, most people there do speak some English. And unless you're in like the province and it's an older person, like a comune, way out in the middle of nowhere, and it's sort of like they're not going to speak much English. I have the same issue. When I go home, when I went to Calabria, they don't speak like English except the son, because he worked in England for a couple of years, so he's got good English. The daughter, così. And then when I met the other family in Abruzzo, not a lick of English, not a lick. Again, they're older folks in their 60s and 70s. I shouldn't say older; it's only 10 years older than me. But they definitely they're in a small town in the middle of Abruzzo.
There was no need for them.
Exactly. So let's talk about some of the stories. Are there any in particular that really stand out? You say that's one I don't ever want to forget.
Well, the one is, I guess, the last tour through the house. When my cousin Michael, the house was up for sale.
For your grandparents?
Yeah. And I made the last tour through the house and walked through and had all these emotions and memories. That one, one of the things that I did with that is they had old skeleton keys. Do you remember skeleton keys? They never, on the front door they had a modern lock, but all the other keys in the house were skeleton keys. And I would find them and I put them in my pocket and take them as a remembrance. And then what I did is, because I got some of that woodworking gene from my nono, I made a little case for myself and my mother with 4 of the keys in it. And then after Mom passed, I gave it to my cousin Michael, who grew up in that house as well.
When we had to sell my grandmother's house, when she got old, she couldn't live there anymore, and I hadn't moved back to Pittsburgh at the time. I could probably guess exactly what you were feeling, because I grew up with my grandmother. And so going through that house, to your point, this is the last time I'm going to walk through this house. There are a lot of emotions.
Yeah, each room.
Going through. Yeah.
Each room.
It's crazy. I don't think people understand the connection to a place. There's something. It's part of you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it had been there, long before me, and, it's still there, but it's not in the family.
Now, as you kind of continue to reflect, and I guess the end game is you want to put a book together.
Well, not necessarily.
Okay. You've got a lot of good stories. That's why I'm wondering.
No, this is just, for the family.
Yeah.
Just for the family.
Well, I'll throw this at you. It's well written, because I read the one that you sent me, which was the wine. I can't remember the name.
The Last of the Wine.
Thank you. I can't remember that. You'd think I would be able to remember this, but I can't.
Yeah,
no, these are nice. They're nice stories.
And, again, they're from memories. There's some embellishment, but
that's what makes a good story, though.
Yeah, but I mean, it's my memories of the things, like the Last of the Wine. I mean, it was. I can remember, a day in October when we were told we were going to make wine, and I couldn't wait to get to Nono and Nona's house, because I knew what the plan was. The plan was, there was going to be food there before the guy came, delivering the grapes. Because Nono had gone down to the strip and purchased grapes a few days before.
So come with the big crates of grapes.
Come in with the big,
my neighbor used to get that.
Undercover, because, again, you had to be quiet, not tell anybody, because there was always the fear that the police would raid, and because you were making wine. But, I mean, as you walked through the neighborhood during that month of October, you knew which family was Italian, because, the Cellarinis, you could smell the wine coming. The Dragos, you could smell the wine. The Venturas, you could tell. And then the other thing is there was a common wine press that went from house to house to house. So it's like one night we had the press. The next day, that press was broken down and taken to another neighbor so they could press their wine.
Wow. What was the significance of remembering? Just the experience of it, though? I mean, because every year was kind of like this.
Yeah, it was like that. And then, what happened was that one summer, Nono had to have, he had gallbladder and appendix problems. And the doctor told him, he had to take it easy. And at the time, we had an old coal furnace. And so they replaced the coal furnace, because that's where the steaks used to get grilled. And they were told, Nono was told, to slow it down. So it was like that was the last time that, remembering the last time that we had made the wine, because he had to slow things down.
Catches up to all of us. That's that's a sad reality of life, but that's why you got to enjoy it. You got to enjoy it while it's there. What do you teach your kids?
Well, what we've done is we've continued a tradition that my wife's family did. Her family comes from Ancona, and I was able to get in contact with them after there was years of non-contact. But every Christmas, in order to celebrate her grandfather, we do the 7 fishes, and the kids now, my grandchildren, are helping me fry food, and my son's there. My grandson and granddaughter are there. Everybody's kind of pitching in, to make dinner. We still try to, they want me to speak to them in Italian, but they're not understanding, and I'm not the best. As the older I get, and being that I'm farther away from it, I'm losing, the ability to speak and understand. But we try to teach them the importance of family.
But you do try and teach them a little phrase or a word here and there just to keep it alive.
One of the things that
that's important though to me. I don't care if they're super fluent. At least
Dami Baci is one of our favorite ones. Dami Baci, give me a kiss.
Oh, jeez. No, but I certainly appreciate that one. I don't remember that one. What are some other things you try and teach as far as, you don't want to be morbid, but, God willing, you'll have a nice long life. But, let's say it's 30, 40 years down the road. What do you hope your kids remember?
Well, I hope they remember that, I tried to give them a good life, tried to have them remember, their grandparents and great-grandparents, respect for elders, and just,
It's amazing how when you're younger, I almost want to say that's almost a hollow statement. And it's not necessarily because we're getting older, but it goes back to the introspection. When you realize how much, especially depending on when a person's life was, but I don't think there's ever not been a time in man's history when there wasn't some crisis, something. And older folks, they've been through, just through sheer time, have been through multiple things. And you hope that they have wisdom from that. And ideally, you want to take from that wisdom and not have to repeat the same mistakes. So that's not a hollow statement to respect your elders and to listen to your elders and to learn from your elders. But I don't know. I wonder if our society teaches that. It does come down to us having to teach that to people. If you could leave advice to somebody that's listening right now, let's say somebody that's older and says, listen, I got grandkids and they don't seem to give a damn about any of this stuff. Not even necessarily Italian culture, just anything. What do you tell them?
Well, I say, you don't have to be a great writer. What you have to do is put down things that you know and you remember, put them into writing so the next generation has that and knows a little bit of something about yourself and what you've experienced during life. I think that's important because one of the things that I say is, a lot of the kids today, they know they're Italian, but the only way they know that is because there's a vowel in the end of their last name. And, they've got to know, as you were saying before, the Italians have had a bad history in this country at times. You look at what happened to Sacco and Vanzetti, years ago. And I can remember, when Martin Luther King and John Kennedy were shot, my Nene Eugenia said, oh, thank God they're not Italian, the assassins. Because there was still that stigma
right.
of the mafioso and, the gangsters. So, there are good things that happened. In my research and study of history of the Cadore region, the person that started Bank of America was actually an Italian, and it was the Bank of Italy.
Right.
And, those are the kind of things, again, somebody changing names to something America, to outweigh what the history really was. Remember your past because,
do you feel like Italians nowadays appreciate that kind of stuff? Do you think even Italians care or know about that? Italian Americans, I should say.
I think they're losing it. They're losing the history. They're losing the...
I think they're losing the give a damn, to be honest with you.
Well, true.
I just don't... I'll give you a good example. Folks know, they're listening, know I'm very upset about this. Where I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh's Little Italy, and there was a church there for the Italian-American community. They tore it down. They didn't... the diocese didn't bat an eye. I don't care what they tell you. It could have been saved. They chose... It was better. There's got to be some reason that they tore it down. But what kind of bothered me is there is some outrage. But if you were an Italian American and you're from that area, you should have been screaming. You should have been out there with signs and pitchforks But I don't.
The same thing's happening with the churches in McKeesport. There's two churches, St. Robert Bellamy and St. Mary's Polish. The diocese has said, no more. And the Polish group in McKeesport, they're fighting, to try to have that reopened or see if somebody else can, somehow else the diocese can make that work. So, it's not only the Italians, but I think, other ethnic organizations too.
The farther removed we are. Right. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm born in the United States. Obviously, I'm American. I served 20 years in the U.S. military. I love my country. But doesn't mean you can't remember your culture and your past. And I know there are people that say, well, you can't be there. You got to be an American. Well, define America. Is it just hamburgers and hot dogs and 4th of July? I mean, there's so much more to that.
Well,
and your culture is a part of America.
You can't find an American that doesn't have an immigrant
Exactly.
root.
And even the ones we say, well, Native Americans, well, they didn't sprout that out of the ground, folks.
Yeah.
Everybody has moved some point in their history. But, I do want to go back one kind of comical, well, not comical, but, the Diocese of Pittsburgh is trying to do everything in its power to make sure nobody wants to go to church anymore. In my 2 cents humble opinion, because of these stupid decisions. And but again, I look at the neighborhoods and I say, but you're just as guilty of that, because you've put them in a position that now they can do it with almost no repercussions. So okay, now you've bulldozed Immaculate Conception, this church.
Yep.
Now what? Okay, what's the response to that? So that's why I will never give a dime to the diocese. That's my personal opinion.
Well,
but I'll still go to church on Sundays because if I put my faith in man, I would be an atheist.
Well, one of the things I think that the diocese never did was respect the ethnic backgrounds of these churches and trying to...
Unless it suited them.
Yes.
Yeah.
But,
no, that's exactly right. They didn't care about the community. They don't understand the importance of community. So if you don't understand the importance of community and you're going to bulldoze churches, who's going to be there? Where are they going to be, and who's going to be there? What you've told them was, we don't care about your community. It's not important to us. Now give us your money or else. That's kind of what and I'm a lifelong Catholic, and I still go to Mass on Sundays because, again, I believe in the theology, but I do not believe in the people. And I think, not to make this a theological conversation, but, you can go back 2,000 years and say the church has always had screwed up people in charge since day one. Well, not Jesus, but think of one of the 12.
Yep.
So you have to expect this. But where I'm frustrated, though, is, I kind of blame the generations that didn't teach the next generation to respect things. So you're making a concentrated effort to teach your kids this. Now, at some point, they've got to own it. But this is my philosophy: is you've got to at least sprinkle the seeds.
Well, and I think especially with my children, my one daughter's named her daughter Dolce.
Sweet.
Sweet. Okay. My other daughter has 3 children. Her firstborn, who's soon is Gianni, Gionni, Gianni. Her second one, Nadia, and her most recent, who's 6 years old, is Angelo Giuseppe.
Wow.
And the thing is,
Good Italian names.
Good Italian names. So I mean, we've kept something. But one of the things, and this is a story that I just wrote not too long ago. It was when little Angelo was born. I asked my daughter, I says, we went to the hospital and said, what's his name? She said, well, we haven't decided on a name yet. So we went back the next day and said, well, have you named him? And she says, yeah. She says, I hope you like it. And I said, what'd you decide on? She says, Angelo Giuseppe. And right then I felt, come non sempre ditti, piti di peli. I felt this chill go through me because I said, Nina, do you realize that my grandfather's name was Giovanni? So you named Gianni, which is a variation, but Nonna also had 2 brothers. One was named Angelo, and one was named Giuseppe.
Oh, did she know that?
She didn't know that.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I mean, there was something there. I still say that there was some connection there.
That's nice, though. That's a good connect. That's a good thing. I like that. That's a nice story. And you know what? And naming does matter. It does matter. That is part of your roots, part of your culture. I don't think people should be ashamed of that. I mean, there were back in the day where people were changing their names. I mean, Dean Martin's name is not Dean Martin.
Right.
So, there was a shame and they changed their names. I think if you're ashamed of your culture or who you are as a person, why would you expect anyone else to respect you then?
Well, and it's, even in one of the stories, it was a conversation with Nonna. I'm kind of out there at night, taking the seeds off the zinnias, and kind of like in his days, and somebody's talking to me, and it was Nonna, and I'm saying to her, I said, you never met your great grandson. I said, his name's Christian. I said, the reason he got that name is because I remember when we were young, if you saw a good man or if he was a good man, you'd say, lui un bon Christian. Okay, and I says, so I thought, well, we're gonna name him Christian because I hope that he grows up to be a good man. And every time I say his name, maybe you hear it. And I said, the other thing is your great granddaughter, her name's Nina, and when you ever see a little girl, you'd say, oh, che un bello piccinina. And I said, so we, my wife and I said, well, what about Nina? So, in some ways, my grandmother influenced the names of my two children. And my children, have been influenced in some way to name their children in an Italian version.
So the good thing then is the seeds you're planting or have been planting are sprouting. And that's good.
I miei fiori.
See? Perfecto. I get that. It's for the folks who are listening, that's one of his stories. Glenn, I want to thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you.
This has actually been really fun because everything you've talked about and kind of peeking through some of the other stories, but having read it through, it's exactly what I want people to do. I want people to remember. I want people to remember because if something's not important to you, it's not going to be important to other people. So if you don't care about you and who you are and where you've come from and your family, why would you expect anyone else? Why would you expect your kids and your grandkids? If it's not important to you, why should it be important to them? And I think what we've done as a society, my 2 cents, is we've redefined what is important. And unfortunately, that's not the right things. And if you don't believe me, look around. It's a very materialistic, immoral society that we live in. Does that mean everybody's bad? Of course not. Does that mean there aren't good people who are doing the right thing? Of course not. But the problem is what used to be, a fraction of the population has gotten very large, in my opinion. And I'll kind of bring it full circle. And that's why you have people saying, I'm Italian American. You say, buongiorno, and you go, huh? Okay. Or why you have nobody outraged when churches get blown down. Because no one told them how important those things, little simple things were. So Glenn, I'll give you the final thoughts.
Well, I really want to thank you for giving me the opportunity, and in the end, ci vedon.
Grazie. Grazie. In bocca al lupo. Let's see if you know how to answer that one.
Nope.
Oh, okay. Just as long as you say crepi and not grazie. So for the folks that are listening, in bocca al lupo is in the mouth of the wolf. Right. And you don't say grazie. You say crepi, which is kill it. It's like saying break a leg. All right, folks, listen, that's enough of that. But if you haven't had a chance to watch the documentary Fedeltà, I'm going to encourage you, get out there on Amazon and watch it. Why does he keep reminding us? Because this is the 80th anniversary of the construction of the chapel, and I would love to see some of you, if not many of you, in Chambersburg in September. I'm going to be there September 11th with about 30 family members of the prisoners that are coming back. So if you can make it September 11th, come on out to Chambersburg. Otherwise, enjoy the film. And folks, again, have a wonderful and blessed week, and I will see you hopefully next week. Take care.